All right, I think we're ready to begin. It's 6:01 p.m. and I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to our South Weber City Council meeting of June 16th. Thanks for coming. All council members are in attendance, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Alberts and a prayer by Councilwoman Petty.
We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we come before thee with gratitude for the opportunity we have to meet together as a council and as a city, and we are so grateful for the responsibilities that we share in this, and ask that will help us to make good decisions, help us to have an open heart, an open mind, help us all to be able to communicate effectively. And we are so grateful for all of our military, our police, our fire, and for everything that they do for us and for our community, and ask that they'll watch over all of them. We are so grateful for our wonderful community of South Weber, and ask that we will continue to grow and prosper. And we love thee and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilwoman Petty and Alberts. Appreciate that. We will go to our next item, which is the COVID virus update. Davis County Health hired 20 more employees to keep up with the increased demand on time. 65.7% of cases in Davis County are from known contacts, and that's good. That means travel cases are down. The thing that is concerning is that the workplace exposure is increasing, becoming a bigger concern. There are currently no active cases in South Weber City. Woohoo! The unemployment rate in Davis County is also dropping. It's at 8.9% now, which is positive. 73%, we have 73% in Davis County hospital utilization, which is down a bit from last week. We just don't want to get up to 90%. That's when we have to start worrying that we're overfilling our hospital. The antibody testing done by the Red Cross indicates only 2% of the public has immunity. And to achieve herd immunity, we need 80% of the public. So we're a long way from that, which is unfortunate. So,
Mayor, may I ask a question on that?
you may.
Do they know what percentage of the population has been tested for that?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how big the study group is.
Okay. That may be something to note, because 2% of however many people have been tested does not indicate total 2%
Right.
of the population.
Right. There's always going to be a variability there.
Hello. I work with the Red Cross all the time. And we've had a couple people that have been tested for the antibody, but the antibody that's coming out some of the time is not necessarily for COVID-19, it's for other COVID from the past. So
Okay.
that's why when they're saying 2%, they're testing a lot more than that, but.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Okay, there's an increase of high-risk cases in Davis County. That's for those who are immune compromised, and that is concerning as well. And Quinn, the Davis County Health is still working on statistics to show percent of cases or deaths with underlying conditions, and hopefully by next week they'll have some more information for us on that. So that's all that I have. Dave, did you have anything to add to that? Or okay. All right, with that then we'll move to public comment. Please state your name and address. Please keep it to 3 minutes or less. Address the entire council, and know that we won't be responding at this time. We're now open for public comment. Okay. Oh, here comes Amy.
I was waiting for TG to come up, because I don't want to follow him. So. Okay, well, let's get to it. Amy Mitchell, 1923 Deer Run Drive. Dear Mayor and City Council, it seems to me like we beat around this bush time and time again of the us against you mentality.
I have heard some of the accusations of false information being put out there in the community, and I want to state out loud and in my public comment that anything that I have researched and been privileged to come across is 100% accurate. Nothing I have seen on the SWPCA blog, Facebook page, or in discussions has been inflated, but has been factually based with information found on the city website, meetings, published studies, and the like. I understand how some of the things posted online might seem like personal attacks, but I also feel personally attacked. My very home and the well-being of my family and neighborhood is being threatened. I have said multiple times that we do not want a connection to Layton in any form. It was blatantly clear on the last general plan that the majority of the citizens did not want it, but it still managed to be put on again. So if the citizens' voices have been heard, and yet it's still there, then yes, this is a personal attack on every person who said no the first time. Getting everyone to fill out the survey should be the goal of all of us. Then we will deal with the results together. I ask that in this climate of global hostility that we work to find a way forward together, all of us working for the greater good of our city. We need to squash the us against them mentality. It is all of us working together to make this city what we can imagine together. I'd like to turn my comments over to the budget. After looking at the budget, I'm shocked at how much money the city spends on so many things that just seem outrageous to me. Why do we need to spend money to upgrade a sewer in one of the newer parts of town? Can we please rein in the spending for a city this size? We are on a limited budget and we need to find ways to cut spending, not find money to cover more things. Could you please share with the public in some way why some of this money needs to be spent? I don't understand why the need to purchase more land for a public works building. Can't we creatively use the land that our city already owns and put a new building on it? And then going to last week's meeting, I was shocked when the code enforcement was brought up for the RV park. It seems like we are unable to enforce the code violations for an Airbnb that is one house, but we somehow think we can do it for an RV park with up to 120 spaces. I'd like to know how that might work. And my other concern with the RV park is that it has quiet hours from 10 to 7. So can we ensure that the car wash has the same quiet hours? It should only be allowed to run during the same hours to respect the citizens that live close by. Thank you for your time and efforts. Let's find a way to work together to make our South Weber what we all want.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah.
Corinne Johnson, 8020 South, 2500 East. So I emailed in some comments to the City Council, but I figure since I'm here, I'll take an opportunity to state them vocally and publicly. But it's a follow-up to the comments I gave last week on the fire department. I'm just asking if we can get about a 6-month or so amount of time of the calls for the South Weber City Fire Department provided to me and to any other citizen who would like to see that, of how many calls they receive, what type of calls those are, and where those calls are from, and just to get an idea of where our fire department is spending their time in the city. I know that spending in the city is a big concern, not just for me, but for a lot of the citizens in our community. And I agree that recognizing that we have a very small, limited budget makes it even more necessary for us to consider if we can afford the things that we would like. And I think oftentimes there's services and benefits that we would like to be able to provide our community, but it has to be highly considered if we can actually really afford those services. And I think in terms of the fire department, that's just a question that I have there. I'm listening to Amy's comments. I do want to echo back the fact that comments that have been heard towards an organization that is trying to do their best to inform and educate and involve the public that are untrue and inaccurate, and that those comments do not reflect greatly on the leadership in our community, and that our information is accurate to the best of our ability and our knowledge, and that it would be nice if moving forward that it could be acknowledged that our efforts are trying to help our community, not incite anger and intentionally deceive citizens in our community. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. All right, any further public comments? Okay, hearing none. Let's move to our next item, which is approval of the consent agenda.
Hey, Mayor, do we get an opportunity to respond to some of the public comments, or do you want to hold that till later?
No, no, please go ahead.
Okay.
If you'd like to respond.
Because I wanted to follow up. Thanks, Corinne, for your comments, especially last week. You made some inquiries about the fire department budget, and you followed up again today. To your question today, again, I'm in a reactive mode because I didn't have but a week to respond, and I'm still trying to get some information. And I believe, Blair, we're meeting next Wednesday, the safety committee. And so your inquiry request is being followed up, and we will be looking at that on Wednesday. But to your direct question, in the last 18 months, I got these statistics today. The South Weber City Fire Department responded, sorry for the vagueness, 450 to 460 calls. Of those calls, 25 were outside the South Weber City's responsibility or jurisdiction. So that's about 5.5% of the calls for that 18 months were outside the city limits. Meanwhile, during that same 18 months, 17 calls responded to help South Weber City from other agencies that included multiple trucks from multiple departments. All were fire, but three were medical. And those 3 medicals, because we had responded to a medical and our ambulance was en route. If you remember, during the South Weber days, there was an incident during the parade, and we had to transport that person. Well, something else happened, so we had to call somebody from Layton to respond to that one. So in regards to the second question you had last week with regards to are we charging for our services? Our ambulance services, we do. Any call outside South Weber City gets billed by the South Weber City Fire Department. No other city gets a cut of that. It all comes back here once it's billed. We do have mutual aid agreements with other departments. Of those 25 calls of the last 18 months, the majority were with Morgan. But now that Morgan has improved their situation, we don't anticipate there being as many of those calls moving forward. Yet, I asked the public to be reminded that it wasn't too long ago where South Weber City was a recipient of most of those mutual aid agreements where the people were coming to help us. Now that we're at the ability to help others, we try. So the majority of our calls are not outside our jurisdiction. I made a contact with you last week to try to get some of the data, and we're still working on trying to get some of your data. But you mentioned Price City. Some feedback that I got on Price City as a comparison. They are twice our population, that South Weber City is, and yet their demographic is a little bit different. They have a resource that relies upon the mining industry a little bit more, so they have a little bit more resource for their volunteers. And one thing I want to bring up is the mode of operation for Price City. They have a few administrators, but the majority of their fire department are volunteers. In 2017, that was a similar model to what South Weber City had. We were a volunteer fire department, but we made a conscious decision at that time to become more of a fully staffed, part-time firefighting department. And I emphasize that we're not full-time firefighters. And that's a misnomer that's written into our budget. It says FTE. We don't have any full-time equivalents in the city. We have part-time firefighters. Full-time means 24/7, 365. And so your other question on the budget, I'll just go to that now because it has to happen now or in the budget. But while I'm on a roll, I'll just keep going on my roll. You mentioned the enormous amount of cost for our fire department versus the revenue streams and the comparisons. I understand that. I think a lot of that has to do with our mode of operation, our model, being that we are now a fully serviced part-time staff. But the main cost of the fire department budget is salaries or wages, 405,000, I think is the number in the budget this year. In talking with staff, the normal rotation is to have 2 people at the station 24/7. So if you take 2 people 24/7, 365, that's 17,520 hours. So 405,000 divided by that many hours roughly works out to be $23.17 an hour, roughly. It's like 17.5 cents, but I rounded down. My point being is, you look at the salary rate, and that's just average. A lot of times they have more than 2 people at the fire department because they have to do training. One example was they do hose training. It takes more than 2 people to take the hoses and load them onto the truck. So you have to have more people there. So this is a skewed amount, meaning the cost per hour is higher than what it really be if you look at the average cost. So when you look at the average cost for the firefighters, it's within the range of a firefighter cost for the city. So we're still continuing to look at the data to substantiate or find where we might be overspending. So we're not ignoring the inquiry, but we need more time as we continue to delve into that. But I want to let you know that we are looking into that. I want to get your response to that. So that was my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Windsor. Appreciate that. I believe there is also an email to you, Corinne, by Derek Tolman. I'm not sure what it says because I just saw it, but anyway, that is on.
It's to make an official grandma request.
Okay, yes, he's requesting that you make an official request for that information, so.
Oh, yes,
A grandma request.
got it.
Okay. All right, does anyone else want to comment?
Amy, I was just gonna say that, your questions, if it's okay,
Haley, talk into the microphone.
I was gonna address your questions in the agenda on the budget, if that's okay, and I'll get to those then. That'll work? Okay.
All right. We'll now move to approval of the consent agenda, which consists of the May check register and the April budget to actual. Are there comments or questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Councilman Soderquist. Do I have a second?
One second.
Okay, Councilwoman Alberts, thank you. Any further comment? And we'll have a roll call vote beginning with Councilman Windsor.
Aye.
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 And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 6 is Resolution 2020-26 Certified Tax Rate. Each year, the county looks at all properties in our city and determines their assessed value. They work with the state to determine the certified tax rate for the city. The rate is determined by taking the dollar amount levied last year divided by the current assessed value and then adding an additional amount for new growth. The city must adopt this certified tax rate to allow the county to collect property taxes in the city's behalf and distribute them to city once collected. Last year's rate was 0.001441 and is 0.001403 for 2020. This rate should generate $754,000 in property taxes. This will be an increase of about $53,000 from new growth. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mark?
No. Unless you have questions, I can answer.
Okay, are there comments or questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2020-26?
Mayor, make a motion, we approve resolution 2020-26 certified tax rate.
Second.
Okay, Councilwoman Petty and second by Councilman Halverson. Any further comment?
Yes.
Okay.
I would just like to go on record for the public and recognize that last year's tax increase was a difficult pill to swallow by most. And still, I think today, many still don't understand why the tax rate had to go up 100% and what some of the dynamics were behind that. Let them, or stumbling over my own words here, but the tax you're seeing today has eroded from a 0.144% to a 0.140% because of the inflation that we've seen over the last year on the housing values. And that allows us to receive the same amount of dollar. That same dollar, we have the responsibility to make sure it's spent wisely. And the thing we're hearing last week, this week, continue to hear, is there's upward pressure as to making sure we spend those dollars wisely. Yet I don't believe we can continue to allow the tax to erode away for another 30 years and have the same auspicious opportunity to raise it 100%. So we need to look at this every year, but we need to be forthright with regards to, do we need the extra revenue and what's causing the drive for the extra revenue? But I just want to make sure the public understood why we're holding the rate this time.
Thank you, Councilman Windsor, for pointing that out. I appreciate that. I actually had one resident come to me and request that we raise taxes because of lost revenue from COVID. So I was baffled and speechless, but just so you know, that did actually happen. So, all right. Okay, we'll have a roll call vote now, beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 Okay, and the certified tax rate passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 7, Resolution 2020-27, Fiscal Year 2021 Final Budget with Consolidated Fee Schedule. All cities in Utah are required to adopt a city budget outlining expected revenues and expenditures for the next fiscal year. Staff and the City Council have worked together over the past several months to put together a balanced budget for all funds, which is fiscally responsible and meets the needs of the city for the fiscal year ending June 20th, 2021. A public hearing was held on June 9th, 2020 for the public comment on the tentative budget. Included as part of the budget is the comprehensive fee schedule, which will also become effective July 1st, 2020. And I want to turn the time over to Mark to, did you want to speak to? Okay.
Mayor and Council, as we've worked over the budget for the past several months, everything that you see in the budget, we've discussed many times. Just for the public's information, it was developed by staff, as well as everything that's in the budget has been reviewed by various committees. Those committees are generally made up of 2 council members, so that the committees, it's not the full council. We've also had discussions as a full council on everything that's in the budget.
And the mayor.
And the mayor. Sorry. I should say, I sometimes think of mayor as part of the council because we are a 6-member council with the mayor being one of those council people. So, but anyway, so there's been a lot of discussion on that. It's been looked at to what Wayne has said. We've tried to hold expenses down. We look at, as the finance director, I look at everything very carefully, not only at the time we prepare the budget, but all during the year. Every invoice I review for its appropriateness and so forth. So we do have policies in place on our purchasing to make sure that we do watch what we spend and follow all the guidelines of our policies and the state guidelines for how we spend our money. There is one change, and it's not a big change in the consolidated fee schedule, and that is not in our fees, but under the Central Weaver Sewer Improvement District. The change is we've put in their impact fees for the next 5 years, where we were just showing their current impact fee. They gave us what their impact fees are going to be for 5 years. So on that page, we put in what their fees are, and we've extended it out for multiple years. So instead of just putting 1 year, when we get that kind of information, we wanted to put that out there. That is the only change. The other changes since the tentative budget we went over last week, we addressed each of those. And so if you have questions that you want to address to me or to David or to the committee chairs for each of the committee, they can answer those questions as well as I can, because they're privy, especially on the larger expenditures, that anything larger, the larger ones, especially capital projects, have been discussed in committee more than once generally.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Do you have any questions?
I just want to comment first. I only said and the mayor because I had the opportunity to attend all of those committee meetings. And I can tell you that this council went through all of those budget items with a fine-tooth comb, and we're very careful in their scrutiny of what's being spent in the city and how things should be spent. So I can vouch for that.
Okay.
That was my comment.
My apologies for not mentioning you, Mayor.
No, that's it. You'll never do that again. will you?
No. But the mayor was there, and so I do appreciate every member of the council's input and the mayor's input, because even during this last week, there's been additional input for just no dollar amounts have changed, sentence structure, spelling errors, those kind of things. But I do appreciate when we get those, because it's been looked at many times by a lot of different eyes, and we try and get as good a product as we can, but sometimes little things are missed. And so we appreciate that. And I personally appreciate that.
Are there comments or questions for Mark on the budget? Okay, I just want to thank you, Mark, for all your hard work with this. And Dave, I know it's a huge project to tackle every year, and we started in January, correct? Working on the budget, and so it's going to be nice to concentrate on some other things. The audit. The audit. I'm sorry. All right. Are there any comments or questions on the budget in general?
Yes, but I'll wait my turn.
Well, I think it's your turn, Councilman Windsor.
There was one question that was brought to me personally. It has to do with, again, back in the public safety or the fire, some question about the salary survey we did on the fire chief, and a comparison of maybe his salary or his pay raise, his cost per hour was based on a full-time fire chief and not a part-time fire chief. And I wanted to communicate that the analysis that was used is, you look at what's out there, and there are full-time fire chiefs, but you look at their cost unburdened. What I mean by unburdened is there's no benefits on top of that. That's just their straight salary. And you divide that by 2,080 to get a cost per hour. And then we looked at those hourly rates of the different fire chiefs and applied our metrics with regards to our salary survey being 15% less for the top, median, and min of those numbers. And that's how we came up with the rate. So even though he is a part-time, it's based on an hourly rate of pure cost, not the overheads and benefits that go on top of that. So I want to make that clarification. There's another part, but I think Haley was going to talk about that one, so I don't want to steal her thunder about the gurney.
The what?
The gurney, the capital
Oh,
expenditure.
yeah. Mhm.
Go ahead. I'll let you have.
Oh, you're just gonna.
I'll give that
jump
one
right
to you.
in?
Yeah, I don't want to
Okay.
steal your
Is this
thunder
on?
on that
Okay.
one.
Yeah, you're gonna throw me in. Okay. Well, I have a couple of different things that I kind of want to just go over, and I'm asked a lot of questions, and I'm still kind of a newbie to the budget, but I just wanted to, for the public's help and making sure that I'm correct, so be on standby to correct me. So a couple of different things. Obviously, as Wayne just mentioned, we will not be raising taxes this year, but it is something that we need to keep in mind so we don't get so far behind. The longer we go before our next tax increase, the bigger that tax increase has to be to catch back up. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. And if you look at our revenue from previous years before the tax increase and after, that was a substantial amount of money that was able to come back into the city and really help out a lot. Now I lost my notes. Hold on. Okay. So if I'm correct, the city is choosing not to pass on an increase in garbage fees to our citizens, and instead we will absorb it. Correct? Okay. And we're doing the same thing for sewer fees this year as well.
Yes.
Okay. And the sewer fees were in a little bit in response to COVID and kind of helping out, realizing that kind of a difficult time for people. So we were able to absorb those costs. Am I reading that right?
We looked at that in the the Municipal Utilities Committee and so forth, and we looked at that if we could absorb the increase which came from the sewer district, that's where the increase there was a raise there, that if we could do it this year, that we would. And we found that, yes, we could absorb that this year. We can't, the sewer district raises it almost every year by 2%. Some years we passed it on, some years we haven't. And But you are right. Looking at the situation we're in, the same as taxes, we decided not to do that. The fees on our garbage collection from Robinson Waste did go up. But we also decided to take a little bit sharper pencil to all our figures and see if there was any way that for this year we could absorb that cost increase, and we're able to do so.
Okay, thank you. And then, so we can save up to 25% into savings. Is that right? 25 or 24% that we can keep as like a rainy day fund? And is that the general fund?
That's in the general fund. The general fund, the limit is the maximum that you can keep is 25% of that year's revenues. And so if we have savings in our expenditures, or we have additional revenue that comes in, that would, when it goes to the fund balance, make that higher than 25%. The adjustment that we do is we transfer additional sales tax from the general fund over to the capital projects fund. The capital projects fund can in a way be a savings account for larger projects. That's where we keep the money for larger projects. The 25% in the general fund is designed to be the rainy day fund in case there's an emergency. And also, since our property taxes don't come into November, it's to give us the cash we need to go through July, August, September, and October to pay the bills that happen in those months. So,
And Mark, the other way to look at it is it's a 90 days of operating and maintenance expenses. That's why you have 25%. That's what it's there for.
yes.
Okay.
And we have maintained that around somewhere between 23 and 25. And that's one of those calculations that I have to figure every year at the end of the year for the budget. And if we go over 25, then in the coming year, we have to decrease it and reallocate some money from the general fund. So it's one we watch very closely. We want to keep it at 25 if at all possible, or as close to.
Okay, you just answered my next question. But if I did my math right, so we have 2.9 million in our general fund, and we have about up to 3.8 that we could set aside to save. That would be the full 25%. So we're setting about 23% for this fiscal year. Is my math right?
There are a few types of revenues that come into the general fund that we have to back out when we calculate the administrative service fees that come from the other funds. We have to take that out of the revenue figure. And it's not by budget, it's by actual figures.
Okay.
And so it's based on
I guess
that.
the long and the short of it is how let me think how to say this question. How do we actively continue to save and build that rainy day fund up to the 25%? Is that our goal, or is our goal to stay? I mean, you mentioned that every time.
We're at it, and we try and maintain it there.
Okay.
We haven't had to dip into it. However, you brought up COVID-19. If sales tax comes in worse than we have budgeted for, and we have to do anything, we may have to next year, which I'm hoping we don't, but we may have to reduce that down, say, to 20% or 15% 1 year, and then work to build it back up. So as we look at our sales tax and what effect COVID and the crisis could have on us, that's one place that part of that money could be used. Right now, it's at approximately $500,000 is what we keep.
Oh, okay. 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 So aiming to answer your question, you let me know if I get this right. So we have 900,000 set aside for an update to a sewer trunk line, and that is based on our capital facilities plan. And after our general plan is over, we will need to review our capital facilities plan based on what we decided to do with our zoning and everything, and based on what those changes may change whether or not we need to update that trunk line. It will mostly depend on our metering and things. So the bottom of the short of it is we believe we are at capacity on the current capital facilities plan now, but we will definitely be at capacity if we upgrade the trunk line. Am I correct on that?
When you say at
No.
capacity, what have
Oh,
you?
no, sorry, not at capacity, sufficient capacity currently.
Right.
And if we upgrade, we will most definitely have sufficient capacity.
Right. I know there's a lot of question around
Right.
sewer capacity, and we're good. Our sewer system is just fine. We have a capital facilities plan that identifies future projects and gives us kind of the path forward as far as what system upgrades need to take place in the sewer system, and by extension, all the other different infrastructures that we maintain. Those capital facilities plans first identify all the different projects. The subsequent or related impact fee facilities plans identify which of those projects are impact fee eligible. And then after that, a related impact fee analysis tells us what the amount of impact fee we can charge as related to those. So the short answer in my mind for the question about why is there money set aside for a trunk line upsize is because that was identified when the capital facilities plan, based on the 2014 general plan, was put in place, that was a needed upsize to maintain the system as we continue to grow. However, in the interim, we have started metering the actual flows of our sewer system. And so it turns out that the actual flows in the pipe show that there is additional capacity that was not modeled. And so that actual data is very, very important. And we have held off on doing that Cottonwood Cove trunk line project for a couple of years as we gather that data, because we are fairly confident that our actual metering flows will make it clear that we do not need to upsize that trunk line, that there is sufficient capacity in it right now, that we wouldn't have to upsize it. So that's dependent on the general plan and then the next capital facilities plan, but most dependent on the metering. So we're budgeting. No, I guess I said it was a short answer. It's never a short answer, is it? Not with me, apparently. The short answer is we're budgeting that money in case we're able to quickly move through the process of general plan, capital facilities plan, and recognize what the next needed sewer project would be. We want to have that money budgeted. But we're not doing that project specifically right now. Wayne looks like he has a better summary than me. I can see it in his
Might be
eyes.
shorter.
It'll definitely be shorter. Yeah. To address the white elephant in the room, that trunk line is not being increased for the lofts or any other project. That trunk line was identified as being previously at capacity based upon theoretical flows that were modeled for the city. We have since learned that South Weaver citizens do not meet up to the theoretical flows. So
It's a very conservative model.
It's a very conservative model. So what we're trying to substantiate and be in good faith of the state code is to demonstrate that we have ample capacity within our sewer system to meet the current general plan. And so that was a project that was identified. It got a lot of heat by former council members as to why are we upgrading a sewer line that was just put in a new development? That's ridiculous. They were right. Because of that, we went in and started metering to kind of verify, is that a truism? And we're finding out that we may not have to, but it hasn't been removed from the capital projects until we validate where we're at. Is that short enough?
I tip your hat for clarity, but it started to extend into length. I point that out.
Okay, so fingers crossed, we're good on that. That 900,000 will go back into, we'll just stay in capital facilities or go back into general fund.
So this is an important point to bring out, that the sewer fund is standalone. The water fund is standalone. It doesn't go into general fund and those types of things.
It
So
will stay in
it
the
will
sewer
stay
budget.
in the sewer fund until the next sewer project.
It's a confusing issue, but there are capital projects that are in the general and there are capital projects for each of the utilities. And so the utilities, you have to keep those capital projects separate. So the public works building is a general capital project, where a sewer line or a water line or a water tank is more specific to that utility.
Okay. Okay.
You're
Ready for
getting
more?
into very exciting governmental accounting.
I know,
which is very
this
different
is,
than
I'm
other
such a
types of
dweeb. This
accounting.
is my kind of stuff.
All right, just a few more. Somewhere in this, and I'm sorry, I don't have it highlighted, so I can't refer to the page, but it says 327,000 has been transferred to the capital projects facility fund to reimburse for South Bench Drive. I was just wondering how much have we spent on South Bench Drive from our capital projects fund that has been reimbursed to date? Do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't write that question out right.
I think I understand what you're saying. I don't have that number off the top of my
Okay.
head. We can absolutely grab that.
Okay.
I know there's been questions about where that project stands since now that it's paved and it's usable and it looks good. We have not received all the invoices from the contractor on that. So we haven't paid out the final payments to have that entire project closed out. But we can absolutely get a paid to date.
Nor
this
have they
point.
received all of the funds coming from outside sources. Just until
Right.
it's
I was
finalized.
just wondering where we're at.
Yeah, we can
Where
provide
we're
a
at
project
today,
update and
how
on
far
where
we're at
today.
there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get that as soon as we have that.
And then I saw that recreation impact fees are transferred each year to the recreation fund to be applied to the principal and interest of the Family Activity Center bond. I thought we couldn't use impact fees for interest payments. Am I wrong?
When the fire station and the FAC were built, we bonded to do that. And then the impact fee, and it was built not only for the capacity needed at that period in time and the population at that time, but also for future growth. And so the cost of that building was eligible, for both buildings, was eligible for impact fees. But not, and so the bond, and when they did the impact fee study, they looked at the recreation center and said, okay, we have excess capacity. And so that it's already been paid for. And so now they're being reimbursed for that and through impact fees. And we continue to collect impact fees. The impact fee study that was done is what tells us that it is eligible and that those monies go. We do the same with the public safety impact fees. The money from that goes towards the bond payments. Many years, the amount of impact fee we get is less than the combined bond and interest payments. So yes, and normally that is true, but in this case, we can use impact fees to pay for a structure. If we hadn't bonded, that money would have just come out of the general funds of the city, and impact fees would pay for it in the future. A lot of times when we build something, we build it now, but we find the source of the money now, but impact fees from the future help to reimburse that particular purchase or that particular project.
Yeah, impact fees are really interesting that you can essentially prepay them, right? Because they come in as development happens, as building permits are pulled and applied for. There's a recognition that it's not just this steady stream of money that you get to spend, every 2 weeks, kind of an idea. And so you're allowed by state law to pay money that you have sitting there in the bank, so to speak. And then once the impact fee money comes in, replenish that fund that you used to pay initially. So that's what's happening in these cases.
So how long is the bond on the fire department, the Family Activity Center? How much is left on that?
I have in my head 15 more years. I believe it was a 30-year bond and it was approximately 15 years ago.
Is that the only bond that we have? Or do we have more?
No.
We have more?
Yeah, we have others.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it, minus 2 more things. So with,
I love how she put that. So encouraging.
all right, I'll make it quick. Regarding the fire department and the questions that have been raised, I feel that the 35,000 that we have for the gurney, I feel like we need to address these questions and make sure that we have these answers for our citizens before we are able to put more funds into the fire department. So I feel like
I would like to see that either put on a freeze of some sort, or removed back into the general fund, and we can use it as an amendment later, pending on that, the Public Safety Committee is satisfied and the public is able to have their questions addressed. And then I know that Chief Tolman, when he came forward with the gurney, he did give the option of going the lower cost route of an automatic gurney, but not auto load, which would have saved us about $14,000. And I feel like that's probably the route that we should go forward with, especially this, as we are seeing that money is tight and as we are wanting to be good stewards of that property tax. So that's just a request that I have. I'm not sure if I make a motion on that or what, but I'll let you guys teach me. So just that. And then my last thought is just, Dave, do you mind responding to Amy's comment about the Public Works building, and can you help explain why we have, or I guess anybody who feels comfortable answering that, the why we're getting a bigger lot, going to a different place, and getting a new building.
You were chair at the time, I'll let you say that. But I'm happy to take it because we had a whole committee and a development group.
I'll take a stab at it and then you can give the short answer. How's that?
I'll do that.
Okay. The initial aspect is we asked why not use the existing land. There's too many problems. I don't want to use the word pollution, but salt and things of that nature that we're under threat of fine if we don't get it cleaned up. We can't clean it up and get the building replaced on that lot. And it would be more costly to have to clean up that site and put a new building on than it would be to look elsewhere. At least that's what we were told at the time. We put some criteria together, and I think we looked at over 30 possible locations across the city, narrowed it down to 10, put a criteria on them to prioritize them, and we're going through that process of trying to find an area that is close to a public access, existing road where we don't have to build roads to it, and utilities are accessible, and it's not in somebody's backyard. It's kind of a hard thing to do when they're built out as much as we are. We did look at some existing property like the S-curves and things of that nature, and could it be done? Yes. Would it be problematic? Yes. Certain aspects. It just depends on where you put the salt storage, where you put the rock storage, where you put the garbage cans, where you put the oil, the gas, things of that nature. You don't necessarily want to be in somebody's backyard. So your question is valid. We continue to look. The budget is top end. We're not looking to spend all that budget. If we can bring it down, we will.
We're hoping to drastically be under that.
We think we have some options. We're trying to be very coy about what we're saying because we don't want to jeopardize our opportunity to buy something and have somebody come and put a bid on us and raise the price up on us. So we're trying to be, not trying to be skirting around the bush, but I am skirting around the bush a little bit to be protective of our interests if we do purchase some land. But did I miss anything on that one, Blair?
No, I don't think so. I mean, and then we'll also have the current facility to sell at the end of all this process to help pay for it.
But can you build anything if there's problems with because of the salt and the
It
rock?
can be cleaned up.
It can be cleaned.
We just also need more storage. We're currently not keeping everything there either. Because of that it's not, I think, proper to be kept on that side.
I think the plan is once we have a new public works facility would be to clean up and then surplus, and that would become residential.
And that would become something, residential or something. So it hasn't been a full discussion, but that has been what the process was. And where we budgeted it last year, it's an item that is moving forward from last year's budget to this year. So it increases our total budget, but it's still just moving from last year's to this year's.
And just to clarify, I made a comment last week that's being taken a little bit to the next step about a new city hall. No, we are not building a new city hall. We're not funding the new city hall. We're just simply exploring what would it take.
There's land that's gonna be up there. Have some salt on it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll consider that. The idea was prospectively thinking if we were to build another city hall, what would that be? Where would it go? What would it cost? And kind of come up with an idea and then bring that back but there's no immediate needs in our plans.
So I'm just speaking from memory of listening to the retreat, but kind of understanding the need for the public works building as far as being large enough to accommodate all of our vehicles that we have, being able to keep them covered and out of the elements of the weather, and having it large enough to accommodate for all of our needs that are not currently being met right now.
It's all of our current needs. The
Right.
plan right now is much greater than what we currently need. So the plan is to build it in phases. And so as we grow, if we grow, you could add on more bays, if you will, or more stalls. So it's not this Taj Mahal that might be put out there. It's to meet the needs of the city today.
Okay, well, I'm true to my word. Those were my last two things. So. Thank you all for the very poignant discussion. I appreciate it.
I hope not. We haven't got to that next step.
All we discussed today is land,
Yeah.
and that is to not bond for the land and to purchase the land.
Yeah. If I have anything to say about it, we pay cash for what we're gonna do. Go ahead. I mean, I'll acknowledge it.
If we did bond for it, like we just learned, and we plan it for future growth, then there could be impact fees that would then help because it's a building.
True.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Could. But you're paying interest on a 30-year bond.
No,
Isn't
I
it?
don't want the bond, but
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
But as Blaine is saying, the impact fees are less than the interest and the payment, basically, right?
Right.
I think there's a whole finance 202 probably conversation about, the difference between saving and purchasing, kind of pay as you go idea versus bonding. There are times where that is, prudent, but again, none of that has even really been discussed at this point. It's just been, let's acquire land and then take the next step once we get there.
And again, any land that we acquire will come back for a public hearing and public notice before we actually extend an offer and or purchase that land, right?
Right, prior to the city actually consummating an agreement and purchasing that, finalizing it, there would be public dialogue about it.
Because if the public doesn't want us to spend, $600,000 to $800,000 on a piece of land for whatever reason, they have a right to say so. So we're going to give them that opportunity.
Right, that'll happen for sure.
Thank you, Councilwoman Alberts. Any other comments or questions on the budget?
So I'll just comment on Haley's, or Councilman Alberts, Councilwoman Alberts.
I go by Haley. Haley's good.
Her comment about the gurney, rather than revise the final budget and have to go through one more revision, we have to approve it anyway, it comes through, so maybe we make a note of it and consider if we want to revisit that issue, rather than go through revising the whole budget. That would just be another option there.
Yeah, so my hopes was to be able to approve this budget, but just with some sort of motion or something that notates that. But Wayne, I cut you off. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I got you
Now that your
covered.
mic works.
I got you covered.
Oh, okay.
I got the wording for the motion because I actually did one of these in another board meeting, so
So we can do that all right.
I got it covered.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, as Quinn was saying, you have, some of the options you have is it will have to come back to the city council because it's over the $10,000. So that's one reason it would. It'd be very easy to just ask that the public safety committee review the purchase before it ever comes back to the committee, and you would not have to change anything in the budget, but just just a request that the public safety, once we get into the next year, review the gurney purchase prior to it coming to the council.
Okay.
I think you got it.
I got it.
Good.
Okay, other comments? Just correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. I believe for the new budget, we did anticipate sales tax revenue decrease due to COVID. Am I correct? And what was that percentage?
Yes, we were looking at I believe a 10%, 100,000. Right now, when we got the March figures, I think we're not only going to meet our sales tax estimate for the current year, but go over that. We would have to, we still have 3 months to come in, and we'd have to drop down to 30,000 each month from the 70, 80 that we've been running in order to do that. We do not know what the effect is. We did reduce sales tax in anticipation of this. I know we do have other contingency plans, which I've mentioned one of them tonight, as when we see the effects. And I think there's going to be a discussion too about our expenditures related to COVID and what some of those things are. Right now, our expenditures, we're not seeing expenditures, and we're anticipating a decrease in revenue, but no one knows what that is going to be. Looking back to the last time there was a recession, we had a 10% drop in our sales tax, and so we based it on the previous recession.
Okay, I wanted to make sure the public was aware that we are taking that seriously.
Yeah, and just for clarification's sake, when you look at the budget, you may not readily see where that shows up because sales tax isn't put into one location as far as revenue. It comes into general fund. It also goes into capital projects. And so total combined, all the sales tax we're projecting to come in is that 10% decrease. But you may look at one number compared to last year and go, wait a minute, that doesn't look like a decrease. So it shows up in multiple places in the budget.
Okay, thank you. I want to comment a little more on that, but I'll wait until after our motion. So do I have a motion to approve resolution 2020-27?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution 2020-27, adopting the 2020-2021 fiscal year budget with the amendment that we ask staff to freeze any allocation or expenditures of the $35,000 capital expenditure for the gurney until the safety committee has had a chance to review options with the fire and bring that back to the council for the full council's consideration.
I'll second that.
I think Councilwoman Albert won the race. Michelle, do you have all that?
So it's to freeze the expenditure of a $35,000 gurney purchase.
Until
After. Until the, okay, that's right. Until the Public Safety Committee
Can review.
and make a
bring it
recommendation,
back to the council. Right.
consideration.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment?
I'd like to thank staff for the enormous amount of effort they put behind preparing this. I'd like to thank the public for the input they've given to help us sharpen our pencil and the trust they've given to us to ensure that we're spending our money wisely.
Amen.
All right, thank you. We have two motions. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right, if there's no further comment, then we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 The motion carries unanimously. Woohoo.
Thank you, Wayne, for that motion written up for me, and being on the ball for me.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment because you probably heard me or some of the other council members frustrated because there's very little point of sale revenue in our city, very little retail or business. And that can be a good and bad thing, but financially it's difficult for a city. But one silver lining of this COVID has been that we haven't had the ramifications financially that other cities have had. We've always worked with a lean budget, and sometimes that's good to have to do. I've gone and spoken to other mayors in the county about our property across the street that really frustrates me, and they will just say to me, well, why doesn't your city just buy it? You know, and the mentality of other cities is so different from what we experience right here that it baffles me. But I'm so grateful that we're able to be frugal like that. Farmington City, their mayor told me that they're going to have to cut their budget by $2 million this year. And that just baffles me. And they're really struggling, and it's been a huge stress to their city. Whereas we have hardly felt the effects financially of this coronavirus. And so I just I just say South Weaver's in good shape. You can be assured, and that's kind of a silver lining to this pandemic that we've had. That we don't have a lot of retail. Now, normally that's not necessarily as good a thing, but anyway, those are just my musings. So we will move on then to reports, and we'll begin with, and I would like to excuse Councilman Soderquist. He has a family event that he needs to attend tonight. So appreciate him coming. Okay, new business. Do we have any new business?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up something that's been on my mind. Sorry, I guess I'm in a talkative mood today, so you just have to bear with a little bit more of me. In light of recent conversations and public discussions and emails and so forth, it occurs to me that when we made the decision, I can't remember how long ago it was, to go away from department quarterly reports to this council, and we get, I don't know if the public realizes, we get briefings maybe on a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly basis from the department. So we're kept appraised as how projects are doing, what's going on, but yet the public doesn't get that information. So when questions are being asked, sometimes I wonder, well, they're missing the gap of information. So with that, I'm wondering if we want to maybe bring that pendulum back a little bit, maybe not go to core reports, but I'm wondering out loud, would the council be open to some other form of public dialogue or public briefing of the different departments? I would suggest as an alternative that maybe we get monthly reports that are posted on the city website, maybe a Facebook page. I don't know if the public relations committee would like to take and wrestle with that one, but I think we need to do a better job of maybe getting out to the public some of the day-to-days that are going on that they may not be apprised of, and would help with some of the questions that come forward during these meetings.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. Those weekly Friday emails are my favorite. They really give you a snapshot of what's going on. So I think the public would absolutely benefit from being able to do that. How would we do that? I guess the community will figure it out.
I mean, when you think of what we did with public quarterly reports, we had the person over that department come and give the quarterly report. It was on record and people were here, we could ask questions. And I don't know when that changed. I mean, it kind of just changed. I mean, but whether we want to do that or not, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but I think it was helpful to me a little bit. I mean, I thought it was fun to make Mark just to put a tie on. Yeah, so
yeah, all the questions that are coming about the fire department. I mean, you can have
Yeah.
the chief come over, he can give you the statistics of how many calls they're responding to, or the police, or the parks, or the rec, or ours.
it's what we expect from the sheriff. So
Yeah.
I mean, it is something that I liked it when they came. So, but I'm open to that.
Well, I think that's, oh, sorry. Dave?
You're gonna make it. Go ahead, Haley.
I think the PR committee would be happy to look into that and see,
Bring back a
bring it
recommendation.
back a recommendation to the council.
Thank
That'd be
you.
great.
Did you have something to say, Angie?
Angie?
I was gonna say, if we all think it's a good idea, can we just say, look,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
good idea, let's do it?
I think your committee needs to meet again.
Well, there's different formats that we can do it in, like Wayne was saying, either an email update or put on social media, just written.
Right.
Or,
The method that we do it in.
yeah.
I would think it needs to be different than our weekly, because I don't want to stifle the weekly reports that we get.
Right.
But I think it could be something that's done monthly, whatever, I mean, however you format.
I think quarterly might be too long, but monthly might be, if we can get every department to do a monthly report of the comings and maybe the goings, and how we get it out there, what's the best way in which they can be shared? I don't know.
All right, sounds like we're taking it to committee.
Okay. Sorry about that, Ash.
Take
Okay. Sorry to disappoint you.
Can I provide staff perspective on this?
Yes.
May I provide staff perspective on this? We actually had a conversation in executive staff meeting earlier today about kind of a standardized, ongoing, regular reporting. There are data like the number of calls and things like that. There are certain data that's readily available. It's easy to generate. We would just want to put that into a format that's easily digestible and understood. But staff was all for reporting on things that are valuable and meaningful to the community. I think we get sometimes stuck in just doing our job, and we're recognizing and adding the layer of, it's one thing to do it, it's another thing to do it and share it, explain it, provide, communicate it. So as staff, we're not inclined to get out into the public too much like that, but we will do a better job, and we'll work with the PR committee to make sure that the format and the information is valuable. And in my mind, it's a living kind of report that we start somewhere and provide information, and if we need to add different items later, we can. But
I guess the reason why I bring it up in summary is I think the city as a whole, administration and council, we are lacking confidence in our trust with our public. And so I think we need to go overboard in regards to regaining a lot of that confidence and that trust. And this is one way in which to attain that, in my opinion.
I agree completely.
All right, we'll take it back to committee then on Angie's recommendation. Okay. All right, I did have one. I shared this information with council on the CARES Act, which is federal funding allocated to our state for COVID-related expenses. The state distributes a certain amount to each city. I believe it's $87 per resident in the city, which ended up being, well, our first tranche is like 3 different allocations, and the second 2, the first one's just given, but the second 2 are based on need. Our first tranche was $222,593. And so that maximum amount is not guaranteed to our city. We must spend the funds by November 30th, and it's only reimbursed for necessary COVID expenditures. Davis County is asking if cities would be willing to pool funds to reach out to more businesses in Davis County and use funds more fully and efficiently. And so they're asking if cities are willing to allocate a portion of their funds back to the county to help to improve the whole county. South Weaver City, Mark told me it currently has recorded $3,500 used for COVID-related expenses, and those aren't guaranteed to be funded, but that's what's been spent so far in our city. Without businesses, I know. Okay, did I mention this in my email? Thank you, Paul. I did. I'm like, maybe we could spend a little bit on better partitions between us. Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to know for just a minute what the council's thought on this is. If this is something they're willing to consider, giving back to the county, what they think we need.
When they say give pool funds and give back to the county, how much are they talking, and what are they really utilizing that for?
They are using it to help businesses around the county that are struggling.
So as I read the CARES Act today, I struggle, how are they giving? So let's say we had a bunch of businesses here. I mean, when you read that, it's expenses that the city has incurred, not the businesses have incurred. So how is the county, and I know you can't answer this question probably, but how is the county going to give those businesses? We already have PPP, and we have all these SBA, the rest of that stuff. And so that's how those businesses are getting aid. How is the county going to aid them as something that costs the county money?
Right.
I mean, I look at, and maybe I disagree with you a little bit, Mark, like our live streaming, I do think it's something that's sped up in the city.
Amen. I totally agree.
And if you read through that, I still think we can apply for it. If we don't get it, we don't get it. We're still going to spend the money either way.
Agreed.
I don't feel like it's not in it, but the only catch and the caveat there was it cannot be in last year's or already budgeted for. We have not budgeted for it as far as I could see. So if we have not budgeted for it, why can we not apply for it? I mean, we may have kicked it down the road another year and a half, 2 years.
Let them make the call. Let's not make the call ourselves.
Exactly.
And so that was the only real major expense. The other thing I was going to say is I think that we ought to, before we consider giving it back, we ought to make sure that there's nothing that the fire department and all those guys have decided hey, this is some essential things we should have on hand. I mean, there's a lot of cities buying temporary facilities. I mean, granted, we don't have a health department like most cities. That's where they're incurring most of the cost. I mean, that's where my contracts are coming from, are those health departments right now. And so they're incurring huge numbers. I mean, not just little numbers like we receive. They're incurring millions and millions of dollars. And so I wouldn't have a problem giving those funds back, but I want to make sure we are covered with what we need first.
Is this the same act that would cover the cost of an employee if they had to go home due to the COVID? That's a different act. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Now, if we have, we're covering additional, it can apply to payroll. There's a payroll section, so that if we have additional expenditures related to payroll.
Those are dealt with your FICA's things as I read it. I don't think.
There is
Okay.
a section that refers to payroll. There's a section that refers to unemployment. If our unemployment costs should go up because people are no longer working because of those things, that applies to a city. There are things that apply if we have overtime. Tell them if we add additional costs because people are working from home. And there is a section I remember reading. There's a lot of different things out there. The mayor sent out a summary. I sent out a larger summary from the state. And then there's the CARES Act itself, which if you want to do a lot of reading, there's the details in it. But all of those are to cover additional expenses which you incur that you would not have if the COVID was not here. And so we do have things, and we're looking at all of those. In clarification to what the mayor is saying, I would just say this. Well, we're not going to spend the $220,000. I personally don't see any expense, any way we're going to have that kind of an expense in our city from this. So the two options are we wait till November and we give it all back, we give what we don't spend back to the state, or we're proactive and we give them a portion that we are sure that we will not need between now and November to the county, because the county, it appears, has a way to distribute it that meets the CARES Act and it meets the guidelines from the state. I don't know how they're doing that, but the fact that they're doing that tells me that they have gotten approval to do this type of a distribution.
So my question for that would be, if the county has a way to do that, why could we not do that, excuse me, within our own city to any businesses here to directly impact our city? So I feel like maybe perhaps we should wait and figure out how they're really doing this, because if they do have the authority, then would the city have the authority?
I think this is something that we could bring to our safety committee meeting. Would that be all right, you two?
No, I think it is a discussion that needs to be had with them. No question.
We need to speak to Chief Tolman and, consider all the possibilities.
It's not just the 220 we're giving back. It's 667,000.
Right, that's the full
That's
tier.
the full amount.
Yeah.
And so we're only looking at spending right now like 10,000 of it maybe, and so
right.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, this just happened this week.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I personally have that same question. Everything that I've read on what the city can and can't do, you've got my opinion on just one item. I do not see how the money, this particular funding, can go back to businesses. I have just heard that the county is looking at doing this, but what part of the act they're using, how this is accomplished, and to Angie's question, it does need to be researched, because I do not see that in the things that I have seen in the act. The act takes care of businesses in different forms, as you pointed out. This money was specifically for governments and additional costs that governments were seeing. We do not have it. If you had a hospital, if you had a health department with those are doing an awful lot. Our additional shifts in our fire department, I'm not aware of any of those. We're able to cover it just in what we had budgeted and we're normally doing. There are additional pieces of safety equipment, PPEs, that we have bought, and those are part of that 3,500, but it's not a lot of money. So there is more to look at, and because if we can give it back to them, that's a decision, but we need to know why they could do that. And I don't know how the city would be able to do that, or how we'd look at businesses, because just a part that I haven't seen in my personal review.
And I wonder if Dave or Mark, one of you could reach out to Curtis Koch at Davis County and get more information on how they would do
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, we'll do some research on what they're doing and what we can do, what our options are.
Maybe before the public safety meets on Wednesday.
That would be tomorrow.
We meet this Wednesday.
Yeah.
Actually,
next week.
We meet next Wednesday.
Oh, next. Oh, you're right.
7 days.
It used to be weekly, but now
We got tired.
we were worn out.
It's honest.
All right. So you have a week. All right.
It's on the
Okay,
list.
but I have a question. Do we have another option than these things that we can think of off the top of our heads while we're on that topic? David?
Looks like Max ready to go.
We didn't know how long this was going to be. This option was something that we already had. One option is to just hang them from the ceiling, get larger sheets and hang them from the ceiling. One of the things that I found when I was looking for doing something like this is if it has to be custom built, it's very expensive and everybody's got them. And a lot of the stuff that relates to plexiglass and this type of dividers that you can see through is on back order. And even these, it took 4 weeks from the time I ordered them to get these. And so
You can make them out of plywood. Nobody wants to see my ugly mug, so.
we could have, if someone knows a business or someone who has the tools and deals in making custom plexiglass type things, that's not something that we have in-house as an expertise.
I'm pretty sure Blair has some contact.
But they're in everything that relates to this kind of protection. And then other than, my first thought was we just get a big panels over at Home Depot and hang them from the ceiling and the little cutout and just route out a little section. But they wouldn't fall over. They would swing if we got too windy in our discussions, they would swing in the breeze.
You call those blowhards? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't say that.
They would swing just because they are.
Yeah, and so,
Those of us on the west end are not having problems.
we did look at a freestanding devices that are readily available, that are just freestanding on the floor. What those costs were. They were something like $350 a piece to $800. Or
We got 222,000 selling.
We're on a budget. This is just fine.
It's fine.
This is just fine. It's not for everyone.
It would be something, but I looked at if you're gonna spend that kind of money, what are we gonna do with those? Those are designed for hospitals, for separation in a hospital, those kind of panels. So I have looked at I've looked at a lot of options, but the only quick option that I had was to hang them. And Dave didn't agree with that one, and I didn't really like punching holes in the ceiling. And
I'll tell you what, I'll just be more careful and we'll make this do work.
if we come up with something, or you come up with something that is cost effective and we can do quickly, we're not opposed to it. We'd like to. This is the best solution we came up with.
I'll talk to you offline, never mind.
Okay.
Thanks, Blair.
This is something we can bring up
We
in there.
can make something.
Yeah.
Haley, was your question broader than that with, are there other COVID-related expenses that we should be considering right now?
Just what Blair was mentioning about live streaming and things, so I think we've covered it all.
All right, well, we'll discuss that more when we get more information, so. Is there any other new business? All right, let's move to.
Oh, sorry, I'm late, but I was just wondering, I'm sure Dave is going to probably cover this, but just to make sure, are we gonna go over our plan or our method for our open houses and how that's gonna proceed tonight?
Yeah, let's talk through it.
Okay.
So, can I just tell you, let me pull it up really quick. Sorry. That most of the planning commission will not be in attendance. Are you aware of that?
I knew Gary wasn't.
Give me 1 second.
I think it was just Taylor that was willing.
One of the 5 planning commissioners are comfortable meeting at open house.
Disappointing.
That is very disappointing.
But I'm okay with proceeding. Other than I'm on the 25th, I may have to leave a little early, but we can talk about that.
Oh, I got you. I'll cover you, Blair.
Okay.
You know, on the 25th, I'll be leaving early too.
Me
So they're
too.
disappointing.
We'll just end it early. How about that?
I'll hold the fort.
Okay.
Okay, so with that in mind, what are restrictions? I looked through the latest order, and the latest phase guidelines. I'm assuming you have as well. What, do we have kind of a plan of how we're gonna have to do this?
So a lot of this will center around proper physical distancing, since that's the new term in the guidelines. They didn't quite go to Angie's term, but they did move away from social distancing. So now they're calling it physical
Hey,
distancing.
and I was gonna mention that. I appreciate it. It makes my heart happy.
They heard you.
Thank the governor, I guess, since they changed that. But a lot of it will center around that. The plan right now is to utilize more of the gym space. Last time we just did half the gym space. We're probably going to need to utilize more space so that more people we can spread out and make sure that there's more distance. We'll encourage masks, but not require them necessarily. That's really the limitations that we have with this event.
We don't have limitations on number or anything of that
No, we'll
sort,
be
as
able
long as we're
to, yeah, we'll
distant.
be able to have people rotate through and we'll be okay.
We're not doing a sign.
There'll be a sign-in table, like.
That's it. I know
Well-
one time with Google.
Well, that's
sign-in.
because we were limited on numbers, but now it's just
Yeah.
as long as you can maintain the distance.
Okay.
Right, we don't have to do times that people register for or anything like that, as we had discussed when we were still in orange and looking at options. So being in yellow does give us a much more free-flowing experience, more similar to what we did in the first draft.
And the governor's order expires the day after this. Is that correct? Well, yeah, but he has to address it again. I think that's the following Friday, so it'll still be in yellow. It'll still be these same guidelines by then.
Yeah, we'll make sure to double check all of the guidelines and look through them to see which ones apply and if we need to do anything to make sure we're in compliance that way. But right now the plan is very similar to what it was last time, with the information available and the chance to meet directly with council and those planning commissioners that will be there to answer questions that people have as they prepare to take the survey.
So you don't anticipate there being too many people there, that some will be lined up outside the door waiting for others to leave?
I don't anticipate that.
Do you know how many will fit in that gym? I guess is my question.
Based on 6 foot,
Yeah.
I would have to look at that. I know that
It doesn't like to do math in public.
All right.
one mistake. I made one mistake and it carried it to the grave. I know that when we opened the FAC and there were restrictions on the capacity based on square footage, we did run some calculations, but that's now a little bit different for this event. So,
Okay.
yeah, we'll make sure that if it does get to the point where we need to limit the number of people in the room at one time, that we'll make that clear prior. But at this point, I don't anticipate that.
All right. Okay, any other new business? All right, we'll move to reports. Last Thursday, Dave, Blair, Wayne, and I met with the new land use attorneys, Snow, Christensen, and Martineau. I feel really good about them. They seem excited to delve into our material and find answers and solutions for South Weber City with regards to our short-term rental predicament, yes. And so I look forward to hearing more from them, but they're going through the material now, so.
Can I ask a question? Is that like a specific committee or is that just?
We had our short-term rental committee meet with them, so, yeah. We've got a committee for everything, don't we, Dave?
Feels like it.
Okay, that is all I have. Councilman Haverson?
Can I ask a quick question on that? Are we pursuing an RFP for full-time council?
Yes, so we've looked at a number of different options as it relates to how we could proceed that way, from doing an entire full RFP. The other option, which is the one that is a little bit more streamlined, which we're pursuing, is we have looked at other cities' RFPs. We've been able to look at some recent ones. We've also been able to generate a short list of attorneys and firms based on recommendations of other cities. And so we have approached that group requesting them to submit. And so once we get that information, we'll be able to essentially treat it like an interview process and be able to go through and narrow it down and do interviews until a selection is made. So speaking of committees, we'll probably need to determine either which committee or if it's a separate committee that is made to review the submissions once we have them all.
Okay.
All right,
Sorry, I didn't mean to segue on that.
that's all right.
The planning commission met on Thursday, the 11th. They listened to a presentation on the property at 475 East 650 South, which is the Stevens property. They've partnered with a new developer from South Weber called Blue Ox Development. So I don't know, can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Marty McFadden.
There you go. Yep. How can I not? But it was basically put back in to bring something different back to the table. So we talked about the open house. Planning Commission has decided that they will continue on Zoom as long as the state law allows currently. So that changes depending on what the governor says at the end of the month. So whether July will be in person or on Zoom, we'll see. They're also, Planning Commission is starting in July, I believe, to working on reviewing all of the zoning and our city ordinances. So if there's anything we as council members have specifics, like RV parks or recreational zoning or any of those kind of things want to be amended, please feel free to send them ideas directly to them or give them to me. I'll give them to the planning commission or whoever, but they're going to go through each ordinance one by one and the zoning and try to make modifications. So,
Good.
So
Are they gonna go like in a specific order or?
right now, each one of them is picking a
Priority?
their own personal priority, I think, is how it's going, and they're picking one ordinance and they're going to review it individually and then bring it back to the planning commission and try to speed it up that way so they're not just doing one at a time, but hopefully hitting the highlights or what. I don't know exactly how Rob's going to do it. It hasn't been real detailed.
Are they starting that at their next meeting?
They talked about starting that, at least dividing them up and picking those ordinances that they're going to start working on.
Perfect, because I have one I wanted to look at.
So one of mine is noise.
Noise, noise.
We do not have a city ordinance on noise.
The
And
engine
so-
brakes in the last few days have been ridiculous, and I've had different members of the community contact me about it.
And that's probably your toughest one to enforce, just because they're on a road that's not maintained by the city typically. Okay, I'm telling you. So, but anyway, That
Doesn't
is-
mean we can't look at it.
There's not a city that I know of that doesn't have a noise ordinance. So 10 to 7 is a typical, in our construction world, noise ordinance, so.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilman Alves.
I don't have anything.
Oh,
I saved all my questions for the
I
budget.
can't believe that. Thank you. Let's see, Councilwoman Petty.
I have no city business to report on.
Okay, thank you. And Councilman Windsor.
Yes, I do. There's another nasty bug that's come out, but I can't remember its name and I forgot my notes. So sorry, guys. It's not in Utah right now, so don't have to worry about that. But there's another one, Tarsalis. It is Tarsalis. Is still active, and the other one that they mentioned is the one that everybody calls them about. They're the angry critters. They're the ones that bite you real quick, but they don't carry the West Nile virus. So those are out, and we know they're out because the mosquito abatement district gets calls right away. Hey, the mosquitoes are out, and those are the nasty ones. Sorry, I don't have the fun name, but
I don't.
it's about this long.
Did the murder hornets ever make it this way? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I took care of them for you. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not on that committee.
Mosquito abatement, yeah. Still got to sign some.
I did have a public reach out to me with regards to the lights near your area on the on-ramp, off-ramp to 89, southbound, northbound. And we did get a report back from staff that we have some broken wires and conduits. They haven't been able to get to those because the conduits have been full of water and frozen. They have since thawed, and we were getting a quote back from our contractor as to the repair, and then they'll get that scheduled, and we'll get a report as to when that's going to happen. I had something else, but it kind of went out my head. I do want to thank the public for their information that they share and some of their feedback that they give us. It helps us add clarity to what we're doing in regards to answering your questions and as we move this city forward. So I do thank you for your involvement. Sometimes I don't appreciate the way it was shared, but I tend to read through the emotion and try to understand the logic and apply it to our decision. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Windsor. Dave, you have anything?
Quick update on the wetlands restoration project. We are partway through removing the fill and placing it on the west side of the park. They are having to take out a little bit more fill to get to the native ground than anticipated. So there will be large piles of dirt on that west side. They will not remain there forever, obviously, especially as we continue to work on a grading plan on that side of the park related to pickleball courts and all future improvements on that side of the park. So it won't remain like that, but for a little while you may wonder why there's that much there. There was a little bit more dirt than anticipated. So I'll meet you there when it freezes over. How about that?
Is this a lump sum contract or is it a unit cost contract? And we're going to be more than 25% and have to pay the difference?
It's not a lump sum. They've approached us as far as change order on that, and as staff we're pushing back on them a little bit and having that conversation about what's going to happen. So
Have you had any more luck with contacting the developers that have dumped the ground there?
I don't have any update on that. Yeah. Other than we're still working on it. We're still trying. So that hasn't been dropped. The other thing to report, I know last week when we did the budget amendment and talked about the garbage cans and kind of the urgent need there and the reason we amended the budget to make that happen, applaud Public Works and Finance as they worked together to figure out a solution on that one. They were able to find an option that can get here basically before the end of this fiscal year. So they're making that purchase, making that order. They're finalizing that, and it's not a 9-week process with this company. It is a different can that we're trying, but there were negotiations to make sure the pricing and things was all the lowest bid, which we're pretty thrilled about actually. And it's closer, and again, the timing of being able to get it here sooner is a really good thing. So just a little report on that.
So you said you got one quote, so is this a sole source?
No, no, we went through 5 quotes. We
Okay.
have our current provider that we normally go through. They're the one that told us the 9 weeks. And then we were able to find, after looking at all those additional options, that this one typically is more expensive and has this much greater delivery time, and they were able to match the price of the other one.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yep. Thank you for the question, because sometimes I know what I'm saying, but I don't necessarily know what you want to hear. So thank you for asking.
I'm listening and I'm hearing.
Anything else, Dave?
That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, Mark, man of the hour.
Nothing more than
All right, thank you. Lisa, anything? Michelle?
I wish I had something, but I don't.
You wish you did? All right, well, if that's the case, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I guess so.
All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.